I said in that article, as you correctly quoted, the matter which might potentially unify into an uprising the Arabic-speaking population west of the Jordan River is the issue of supposed or imagined, frankly, threats to Al-Aqsa Mosque. It didn't happen. And the reason why it hasn't happened yet doesn't mean it couldn't happen in the future. And of course, we are now just about to enter Ramadan, and we are already seeing, unfortunately, some of the kind of activity in Jerusalem, unfortunately associated with that time of year. Just this morning, just a few hundred meters from where I'm sitting in southern Jerusalem, a young Israeli man was the victim of a stabbing attack by a young Arab. And unfortunately, we see an uptick in this kind of stuff each year when Ramadan comes around. It didn't happen because of the countervailing forces to the issue of Al-Aqsa last year. What are these countervailing forces? What do we need to take into account? I think firstly, we need to take into account, and the Arab and Muslim side is deeply aware of this as well, that the Arabic-speaking population west of the Jordan River is divided by differing political and economic interests. There are basically 4 Arab populations, I would say, west of the Jordan River, each of which is quite different in its interests and orientation to the other. There are the inhabitants of the Hamas enclave, Islamist enclave in the Gaza Strip. There are the inhabitants of the West Bank, the Ramallah Palestinian Authority of President Mahmoud Abbas. There's the Arab population of Jerusalem. And of course, there are the Arab citizens of Israel itself. And all 4 of these populations have quite different interests vis-a-vis the state of Israel, quite different economic interests, quite different political interests. And what Israel does is it basically relates to each of them in quite a different way, appropriate to the differing situation. Now, Hamas and the Islamist element here, which, by the way, I think if there were to be elections in West Bank and Gaza tomorrow, would almost undoubtedly win those elections. So it has considerable public support. Hamas understands that strategically, this division of the Arab population into 4 is a very significant achievement for Israel. It enables Israel to manage the conflict generally successfully. So they are constantly trying for ways to overcome this division and to sort of create connections between the Arabic-speaking population. And they seek to use Al-Aqsa as the symbol that can maybe try to do that. As of now, the very different economic and daily and political interests of the 4 populations prevents that, because Arabic-speaking citizens of Israel, whilst many of them may be upset at what they consider or imagine to be a threat to Al-Aqsa, also have economic interests vis-a-vis Israel. They have a very high standard of living compared to other Arabic speakers in the neighborhood. They have a high level of political liberty. They are living in a successful OECD country. Most people living in such a country don't want to jeopardize that. So these kind of interests, which will not necessarily be stated openly, tend to play a role. And as a result, and same with West Bank Palestinian Authority residents. Again, their life is maybe not on the level of people living in Denmark or Sweden. But if you compare their life, or they compare their life to people living in Syria or Iraq, they also have a great deal to lose. So these kind of interests, practical, pragmatic interests, I think militate against what Hamas is trying to achieve, which is a unification of the Arabic-speaking population west of the river under the banner of Al-Aqsa against the state of Israel in an uprising. So that's the kind of dynamic, and I think that has largely held for Israel so far. That's why I predicted that third intifada would not take place, and it turned out, at least I was right on that occasion. And I would tend to think that dynamic is likely to hold for the immediate future. There's one other point to add to that, which I think is perhaps a little bit more nebulous, but important nevertheless to make. I've lived here in Jerusalem for 30 years. I live in a mixed neighborhood of Arabic speakers and Jewish people, Hebrew speakers. And my sense, at least, is that the current generation of young Arabs here in Jerusalem and in the West Bank also, to some degree, I think, is quite different to the generation that made the second intifada 20 years ago, when I was a young man also and involved in, I guess, in the effort by Israel to fight against that and eventually to overcome it. This generation, like their counterparts also in Israel, perhaps also in India too, and elsewhere, is a generation often concerned with self-development, often concerned with personal ambitions, a little bit more skeptical maybe towards religious and nationalist ideologies than their predecessors. And for all these reasons too, I think there is a kind of reluctance of that generation to be recruited by Hamas or whoever else, for what would be, a very bloody undertaking. They, I think, are reluctant to do so. So Hamas constantly tries to throw fire on the fuel, so to speak, and to fuel the flames. But the effect sometimes comes to be as if they light a match. It's like they throw it actually on water, not on what they imagine to be gasoline or kerosene. They throw the match, it doesn't light up. They don't get the expected effect. And I suspect that may well continue to be the case for some time to come.
Please remember to subscribe to us and switch on the notifications for this channel. For our other social media links, more content, and to support our work, please visit citti.net. धन्यवाद, नमस्कार.